Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. My name is Isabella Towarovsky, and I'm a Senior Program Associate at the Wilson Center's Kennan Institute. Thank you all for joining us today for our conversation, Russian Investigative Journalism and the Pandora Papers. Last week, an investigation by more than 600 journalists from 150 news outlets unearthed the offshore dealings of 35 current and former world leaders and more than 300 current and former public officials and politicians around the world. These findings included the financial dealings of President Putin's alleged former mistress, his billionaire friend, Gennady Timchenko, and the CEO of Russia's largest state television channel, Konstantin Ernst. Another piece of news that highlights the relevance of our conversation today about independent journalism is the Nobel Peace Prize that has just been awarded to Dmitry Muratov, editor-in-chief of Novaya Gazeta, in recognition of his role in safeguarding the freedom of expression in Russia and by extension of the bravery of Russian journalists. Today, we will discuss the implications of the Pandora investigation with our panelists in general, and particularly the work of Russian journalists in this project and the challenges they faced as an industry already under pressure by the government. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you to stay up to date with upcoming events and publications on our website, as well as our podcasts, Kennan X and the Russia File. You can find our latest analysis of events in the region on our Russia File and Focus Ukraine blogs. Throughout the program, if you have questions for our guests, you can submit them via email to kennan@wilsoncenter.org, via Twitter @Kennan Institute, or on our Facebook page. Please include your name and affiliation when sending your questions. We will begin today's discussion with remarks from Ilya Lozovsky. Ilya Lozovsky is a staff writer and senior editor at the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, OCCRP, based in Sarajevo. He writes about corruption and democracy, edits investigations, especially in the organization's growing Central Asia program, and trains up-and-coming reporters and editors on investigative editing and storytelling. Previously, he was OCCRP's managing editor. Prior to joining OCCRP, Ilya edited and wrote for Foreign Policy Magazine's Democracy Lab channel in Washington. Ilya's work has appeared in Foreign Policy, The Washington Post, Atlantic, Haaretz, and other outlets. Ilya, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. Yes, great. Thanks very much for having me. It's a great honor, and I'm really glad always to talk about investigative journalism, especially in this region, which is where it is so important, especially important. So I've been asked to just talk about the project as a whole, and I will just say a few thoughts about what I think are the main features that make this Pandora Papers project unique and interesting and important. And then I guess we'll delve into the specifically Russian aspects a little later. So just the first thing to know is that it's a very networked project. This is many media outlets all over the world working together under the leadership of the International Consortium for Investigative Journalism. First question is, why is it like that? The answer is because these days you cannot study international corruption, cross-border corruption, without yourself being a cross-border effort. It just doesn't work. No matter if you are the New York Times, if you are the Washington Post, the Guardian, if you are the best resourced media organization on the planet, you still need people on the ground all over the world because the money flows border to border all over the world. You have politically exposed people, oligarchs from Russia, from Latin America, from African countries, from Asian countries who are using offshore companies that are themselves scattered around the world to buy property that is scattered all over the world. Our investigations focus on property, although of course there's a lot more of it. You can't follow these flows of money. You can't trace the purchases. You can't trace the bank accounts without having people on the ground in all these locations who know the local context, who are not parachuting in from somewhere else. So this is what at OCCRP we like to say, it takes a network to report on a network. And the network of transnational organized crime and corruption is a huge international network that crosses all country borders. And this is the first thing to understand. This is why these efforts like the Pandora Papers are organized this way. So how does this work? ICIJ is itself an international organization. They are very respected. They've done great investigations in the past. Of course, people know the Panama Papers from 2015. They received a leak of files, offshore documents. I don't know who the leaker is. I don't know how the leaker got the documents. This is a very high level of security and secrecy around this, understandably. Even if I did know, I couldn't talk about it, but I honestly don't know. What is the leak? What is this investigation based on? This is based on almost 3 terabytes of confidential financial files. It's about 12 million documents that stem from 14 providers of offshore corporate services. So these are 14 mostly law firms that are themselves scattered around the world that basically create the infrastructure of offshore companies that enable money laundering, crime, and corruption. And so they are really the engine that creates this infrastructure that enables these kind of schemes to function. And so that's why this leak contains so much interesting data, because this is really from the heart of these systems. Now, of course, I should mention that there are many legitimate reasons to own offshore companies. It's not illegal to have offshore companies. It doesn't mean that everyone who appears in the data has done something wrong. That's what makes this such a tricky topic, is because there are legitimate uses for offshore companies that are used by businessmen or even ordinary people all over the world. The problem is their interests in creating these offshore networks coincide with the interests of oligarchs, criminals, corrupt officials, because of the secrecy that offshore companies provide. So that's why this is such a difficult knot to untangle. So these documents, these 12 million documents, were obtained by ICIJ. And then, as I said, it takes a network to fight a network. So ICIJ, started inviting various international media outlets all over the world to join them in reporting on geographically where they are. So the Washington Post was invited, The Guardian was invited, Süddeutsche Zeitung, Le Monde. I mean, it's, I don't remember exactly how many outlets, but it's really dozens. And what makes OCCRP's place in this collaboration interesting is we are ourselves a network. So we have member centers also all over the world. A lot of them are focused here in the Balkans, in Eastern Europe, in the former Soviet countries, of course, including Russia, where Important Stories is our excellent and highly valued partner. But so when ICIJ invited us to join this collaboration, we invited members of our network. So we are kind of an in-between layer between the ICIJ and our member centers. And so it's like a multiplier effect where we can bring our expertise in the regions where we work to bear on these stories. And so I don't even know how long this whole operation took, because I didn't join from the very beginning, but I think it was maybe nearly 2 years. Certainly over 1 year, that this leadership from ICIJ was organizing this investigation, inviting journalists all over the world, creating and maintaining the platforms that it takes. And I'll just mention some of the challenges. You know, it's largely logistical challenges in a collaboration like this. You have to have absolute security. You have to have super high levels of trust. You know, we have worked with ICIJ many times before. A lot of the other partners they're familiar to each other. And so this is why it's so important to have this very solid infrastructure of collaboration and investigative journalism of people who have worked with each other for many years and developed a level of trust and personal knowledge, you know, that enables this kind of collaboration to happen. It just wouldn't be possible without it. So ICIJ created online platforms that enable this collaboration to happen securely. So there are forums where you talk about, you know, Washington Post is going to take this story, Guardian is going to take this story. What can OCCRP contribute here? What can Le Monde contribute here? And it's a lot of very lively conversation. You know, oh, we found something on the King of Jordan, so we start a thread in the forum on the King of Jordan, and here's what we found. And can you guys take a picture over here of this property? Can you guys pull a file from over here? Can you guys do this? And so this is how it's all organized on a continual basis. And gradually the contours of the project are set where it becomes clear, you know, which stories are being done, who's doing which stories. And of course, in addition to this communications platform, you also have the actual data itself. You know, we physically don't have any access to the files. We have to log into the system that ICIJ created with super high levels of security, of course, to actually search the data. Everyone needs to be mindful of the rules of, you know, how the data can be described, how it can be accessed, who it can and cannot be shared with. So it really requires just an astonishing level of coordination and logistics, even to just make the reporting happen. And then you have to organize the day of publication and who's going to come out in what order, and making sure everyone's properly credited. One tricky component is sending requests for comment once the stories are coming together. Let's say you have a story about the King of Jordan who has properties everywhere. You need to make sure that every partner who's going to have their own story about the King of Jordan, they could add all their questions and all the topics that should be sent to the representatives of the king so that he has a fair chance to respond. And then those answers need to go to everyone. So even just that alone is a huge, momentous organizational task. So each partner is invited because they focus on a specific geographical area. In OCCRP, as I said, we focus a lot on the former Soviet Union. Myself, I worked a lot on Central Asia and the Caucasus. Probably our story that I found the most exciting was about the family of Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. His daughters and his son and his father-in-law and several close associates were found to own $700 million of property in London. I mean, I'm talking entire city blocks that are entirely owned by offshore secretive shell companies. And nobody in London would know who these companies belong to. Public property records are public in the United Kingdom. You can buy them for a couple of pounds and find out who owns any property that you look at. So this is meant to ensure transparency. The problem is, you buy the record and you look at the owner and you see it says some incredibly generic company name, from the British Virgin Islands. And then you can't look up who owns that company, because that's the whole reason these companies are created in these offshore jurisdictions, is because the ultimate beneficial owners of the companies are not publicly revealed. And it's only thanks to this leak that we can see not just the owners of the companies, but we can actually trace the email chains of the communication between the lawyers as they're setting up these companies. And so we find interesting stuff like the 11-year-old son of the president of Azerbaijan becoming the owner of a large commercial property in London that hosted the headquarters of Condé Nast, the global headquarters. They were paying their rent to an offshore company that on paper belonged to an 11-year-old boy. And so that's just one of the, striking findings. Another finding we found is Trident Trust, which is one of these 14 offshore service providers. We found their communication when they're setting up companies for Arzu Aliyeva, one of the daughters of the president. And we find them, I guess, 4 or 5 years after beginning to create the company network, saying, oh, this person looks like they are a politically exposed person. They appear to be the daughter of the president. Well, it's a little too late now, because they have already created networks of dozens of companies that were connected to her. And we can see these companies acting as a system. We have dozens of them all filing certain paperwork on the same day, or hiring new directors on the same day. So you can see that this is a big offshore system that is working as one collective, owning these properties, passing them to each other. And then in the end, some of the properties were sold, some of them were passed to a secretive trust, and just none of this would be revealed without access to these kinds of records. So we find, this is one of the most corrupt and cruel regimes in the world, owning vast amounts of property in London. And that's just one story. So I think it's easy to sort of feel a little fatigued by these revelations, because you had the Panama Papers, and then you had what was the next one? The Paradise Papers, and now you have the Pandora Papers, and we're going to run out of P's eventually. But these stories are still going to keep coming out. And there's some level, I think, of fatigue, and it's understandable. But I just want to, I'll end my comments here. And I'll be happy to take questions later if there are any, but I think it's important to follow up and to look at what kind of policy responses can be made to these revelations, because otherwise people are just going to lose. I mean, you don't want to become cynical about this, but you do see high-level discussions at the European Parliament level. You see the introduction of legislation in the United States, which is going to require, if it passes, of course, providers of services to wealthy foreigners to do due diligence on who they're actually dealing with. Right now, that's a requirement for banks, which was instituted after September 11th. Now, the United States needs to join much of the rest of the world in requiring accountants and real estate professionals and PR agencies and other providers of offshore services to do some due diligence on their customers and make sure they stop enabling these kind of corrupt flows. So hopefully we're going to see some policy responses. We're going to keep following up on the reporting. I'm sure ICIJ and all the other partners will do the same, but this is why we do these investigations. And hopefully that gives you some idea of the amount of work that's involved, and hopefully it's worth it. I mean, this is some of the most expensive journalism you can do. This is not clickbait where you can put out 3 articles a day. This is something where a single story takes, I mean, you should see the spreadsheets, you know, just involving one story. It's dozens and dozens of companies. It's dozens of owners per company. It's tracing the money, it's tracing the ownership. And it takes so much work and so much sweat and tears. And it takes money. You know, these you can't make money doing these kind of investigations. You have to depend on other sources of financing, including our members, who we're always very grateful for, our donors. And this is why investigative journalism really desperately needs support, because as I started, and I'll end with this, it takes a network to find a network, and it takes years of building trust and infrastructure to develop these networks, and they need to be maintained and they need to be expanded so that they have some chance of competing with the millions of dollars of lawyers that are hired to create these offshore systems. So I'll end there for now, and I hope that that was a good start.
Ilya, thank you so much. This was excellent. And especially, of course, we all know that investigative journalism, that media companies are often pressured or feel financial pressure to shed investigative journalism. As you say, it's expensive, but it's so needed. And this project is proof of that. So I want to welcome Roman into our conversation. Roman Shleinov, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me introduce you, and then we can get to your remarks. But before we do that, I just want to remind our guests that you can submit your questions via email to cannon@wilsoncenter.org, via Twitter @Cannon Institute, or on our Facebook page. And please include your name and affiliation when you do send your questions. Roman Shleinov is the editor of the Investigations Department of iStories.media and regional editor at the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, OCCRP. Previously, he worked as the editor of the Investigations Department at Novaya Gazeta and columnist at Vedomosti. Roman is a member of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. He took an active part in the Panama Papers 2016 and the Pandora Papers that we're discussing today, the international journalistic investigations that we're talking about. So Roman, please, the floor is yours. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Good evening. Sorry for joining you so late. I have some technical issues. This is one of the important projects for us because, as Panama Files before, these new projects showed very well and disclosed very well the difference between what is stated by our top public officials and what is really existing in their lives. Yeah, that's very important to understand. Yeah, because usually and recently and at least for quite a long time, several years, we have extremely strong propaganda machine. Yeah, the propaganda is covering and is using all the sources. Yeah, the most channels of Russian television are mostly the propaganda. Yeah, the most state-controlled media, the most publications, magazines, radio channels, they are in fact propaganda machines. And recently, there are very small number of really independent media who can afford publishing such an information, which is absolutely different from what the audience can see from TV channels, from major media in the state. Why it is important? Because the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, at least since 2002, nearly from the very beginning of his powerful how to put it, from his emerging in power in Russia, he stated and demanded from Russian businessmen to quit offshores, to stop using offshore zones, to stop with withdrawing money from the state. and to return all the money back to Russia. He all the time stated that it's very important for Russian economy. That's offshore inheritance, their heritage should be completely eliminated. And it was very serious statement all the time. And I think that they are quite well motivated. Yeah, they are true. Russian economy really needs those money, and that are going to offshores from different businesses and from different financial institutions and companies. But at the same time, we see that the years passed. Nearly each year, Putin made such a statement, demanding returning of the money, demanding keeping the offshore schemes. At the same time, the closest people of Vladimir Putin and even his relatives are using offshores and used offshores for many years, as we can see from Panama files and as we can see from these very files and documents we have now of more than 5 registers, yeah, of the offshore companies. We can see all the names there, yeah, to begin with the state bankers and to end with businessmen who are considered to be the closest allies of Vladimir Putin, his friends for many years since St. Petersburg time. And even his closest people, I mean, with the relationships with Putin, yeah, with close relationships with Putin. It means that maybe Russian president is agitating the wrong people. Maybe he should agitate first his own relatives, his own inner circle to keep offshore businesses, yeah, to keep offshore zones. Otherwise, there is an understanding of whether Putin does not control the situation at all, yeah, and he doesn't understand what his inner circle is doing. And it's very difficult to to think that he doesn't control everything. He showed all the time that the control is nearly total. Yeah, and all his subordinates, they should obey his orders. Or those people used offshores and hiding their assets, hiding their intentions. Sometimes even hiding relatives who are not living in Russia for I mean, something like more than 10 years, yeah, and it seems that they are not going to link their life with Russia at all, yeah. So that's very important, because all the time through the propaganda machine, they are showing that they are the most tough patriots in Russia. They do not like what is going on in the West. They do not like what's going on in Europe. We have the propaganda machine working 24 hours, yeah, a day, showing this picture for the global audience of Russia, for Russian people. And at the same time, even those people who rule this propaganda machine, who are making the decisions inside the propaganda machine, who are creating this propaganda, they themselves, as the situation of Konstantin Ernst, the most important figure for Russian television, shows, they themselves widely use offshore schemes, withdrawing money and bringing it sometimes back to Russia, yeah, investing in different businesses. That's very important, because it shows the total hypocrisy of what's going on, yeah, and incompatibility between the picture they are providing for internal audience and the real life they themselves, their relatives, their closest people lead. That's very important to show to Russian people, I think, to Russian audience.
That's great. Thank you so much, Roman. So why don't we, I already have questions that I want to ask you, but we'll circle back to you. Why don't you put yourself back on mute, and I'll introduce Svetlana Reiter. Once again, if you have questions for us, for our speakers, please send them to canon@wilsoncenter.org, via Twitter, Canon Institute, or on our Facebook page. Svetlana Reiter is a special correspondent for Meduza. Previously, she worked as a correspondent for the BBC Russia Service, the Bell, Reuters, and RBC, as well as some of Russia's other major media outlets, including Lenta, Kommersant, Kolta, and Esquire Russia. In 2017, 2021, Svetlana taught at the Russian Presidential Academy of National Economy and Public Administration. She holds a number of prestigious professional awards, including the Red Collegia Award for an investigative report on the Russian government's genetic research program and the Journalism as a Profession Award. In 2013, Svetlana was a Paul Khlebnikov Russian Civil Society Fellow at Columbia University's Harriman Institute. Svetlana, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'll be much quicker than the others, just because I'm not as smart as them. And the thing is, why it's important, this investigative reporting, which we saw in Pandora Papers. First of all, I mean, from my side, it's professional envy because it's bloody good job. It's really greatly done. My favorite two stories, one about Chemezov. He's the head of a huge corporation in Russia, and he's very, very close to Vladimir Putin. And the other one is about the son-in-law of the guy who's also very close to Putin, and he's had a very big corporation as well, but a different one. So, I mean, it's really nicely done. And in the situation when we all living under pressure, really under pressure from morning till morning, it's very important to see how people can fairly, nicely, objectively, and really bloody grand do their job. So, I mean, it gives us all hope, because if in quotation marks, the really terrible thing, which is psychologically very difficult, we have this foreign agent, right? Foreign agent, when they putting the complete crowds to the enemy of the state. So when you wake up, they're doing it mainly on Friday. And before that time, Friday was good, you know, end of the week, you can go for a drink. But now we're all living in a situation of complete terror, because you're waking up in the morning on Friday and you don't know if you'll be the enemy of the state in the evening. That's terrorizing, not only because you will lose your job, but I mean, at some point, you don't know how people will react on you. We're losing resources. I mean, our profession is diminishing so dramatically. It's really difficult to explain. And if you're waking up in the morning and seeing the investigation like this, then you can say F words. I mean, I can still do my job. And we published a lot of articles dedicated to Pandora Papers. We didn't participate in it, but I mean, we also, you know, like draw attention to it, which is also very important, because you can show the people that journalism is still alive. I'm sorry to sound so sad and pathetic in a way, but for me, the most important thing about this investigation, like I told before, that we can live on, you know, we still have these bloody Fridays, but we can still have hope, and that's what gives us. So Roman, thank you very much again. You're my good friend for ages, and you are like one of the best. That's it. Basically from me, I think that's enough, because you already have a lot of questions.
Sveta, thank you so much for this. So we're gonna go to Sergey Parkhomenko next, and Sergey doesn't really require much introduction. He frequently appears here. He is a Russian journalist, publisher, founder of several projects aimed at developing civic activism and promoting liberal values in Russia. Since August 2003, Sergey has been presenting Sut Sabity, Crux of the Matter on Radio Echo of Moscow, a weekly program making sense of the events of the past week. He's also a senior advisor here at the Kennan Institute. Sergey, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isabella. It's always a pleasure to be with you and our audience in Kennan Institute. Thank you for having me. I would like to say, is it very important, in my view, to understand that the situation with major anti-corruption projects like Pandora Papers or Panama Papers, and the situation with the reaction of Russian society on such of corruption investigation, is not some kind of isolated situation. It's not a standalone circumstances. This reaction is described by all the strategy of Russian state, that become more and more totalitarian state. And we see all kind of reactions of these investigations. The reaction of the federal authorities, the reaction of state officials, the deputy of the Duma, law enforcement officers, oligarchs, and even glamorous celebrities mentioned on this investigations. And the reaction of Russian journalistic community itself, first of all, the journalists from the independent investigative media, but also the journalists working on the stunt propaganda media. The reaction of public is that if it's not a journalistic action, not a journalistic works, but the political activity. It's very important and very characteristical for today's Russian state and today's Russian society that the journalistic works is considered as political activity. And it's we see this on the Russian legislation now. We see this on the practices of Russian law enforcement agencies. In fact, the independent journalistic activity in today's Russia is considered as to political activity. That's how Russian legislation treats it. And in essence, the independent civic activity in Russia now is declared a criminal, is declared a crime. People who allow themselves to act independently of the state, or even more to criticize the state, can at any time be declared foreign agent or extremist. That it's what happened to Alexei Navalny organization. Extremist status is in fact the accusation of terrorism. It's the same. Any contact with such an organization can become ground for criminal prosecution for any Russian citizen. Just the contact, just the Facebook post or a retweet or a donation or just some words in support of such an organization. And that's this transition from journalistic activity to political activity, and from political activity to criminal activity. That's the idea of Russian legislation now, and of Russian practice, political practice of these totalitarian states. And any journalist is under risk today to be declared foreign agent or extremist. And that's the situation what any Russian journalist understood now. Any Russian journalist considered as the very real threat, as the very real risk. So this kind of journalism, this kind of independent investigation is essentially a kind of personal civic project. It's just a small personal civic project of any single journalist working on this media, on these media outlets. And that's the explanation about what in all around the world, in all the European countries and United States, and is it the major media who are interested in this kind of investigation and are publishers of the result of this investigation. And in Russia, I don't think about the state-controlled propaganda media. It's evident why it's natural why this media don't not publish it. But I think about some major publications, some big daily newspapers or magazines or franchised magazines with big international names. That is not a question if this this kind of publication will participate in these investigations. Only small or relatively small independent groups groups that considered our profession as an civic project. That's an important thing. That's an important thing to understand the media landscape in Russia and the motivation of different Russian journalists. That's all for a moment. We'll see the question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sergey. I will remind to our listeners and our viewers that if you have questions, please submit them via email to cannon@wilsoncenter.org, via Twitter at Cannon Institute, or on our Facebook page. Please include your name and affiliation when sending questions. So I want to ask, in fact, kind of taking a cue from what Sergey was just talking about, Roman, I want to ask you perhaps about, I think, this point that in Russia, it's really the independent journalists who participate in investigative projects like this is really, really important, given how dangerous it is, given how one journalist after the other is called and designated a foreign agent. And there's just been such a slew, as Sveta was saying, of these designations. What does an independent, small independent organization like yours, media organization, how does it make a decision to participate in a project like this? It seems like the risks are so high. Why do you make this decision? What is the goal or objective that you pursue? How do you manage kind of the risk-reward ratio? I don't know if we can talk about it in that way. So I'd love to hear from you.
Oh, well, first of all, it's necessary to mention that me, myself, and my colleagues, Roman Anin, who is the founder of iStories media in Russia, and famous Russian investigative journalist, and other of my colleagues, we are for quite a long time participating in the projects of in the joint global projects of OCCRP and ICIJ, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. It's important because it's not the organization, which take part. It's exactly we as a journalists, who are taking the decision to participate in such a project. Because for us, it's a great opportunity to see what's going on in reality, to see the hidden wealth of a lot of Russian top decision makers and of the relatives of top Russian officials, both from state-controlled companies or public officials here, and that's very important for us. We think that Russian society deserves to know about the real state of things. Not only watching TV all the days long. And as we can see, regarding the reaction of the audience, regarding what's going on in the minds of people who are giving comments to our investigations, those investigations, those research, and all this information is really important for the audience. Despite the propaganda all the time stating that it is not interesting, it is all well known, what new things you told, President Putin is absent there in the files, and so on and so on. It is very interesting for Russian audience. And nearly all investigations, especially major investigations about the closest circle of Putin, who got wealth because of his presidency. It is very interesting all the time for Russian audience. And despite all the major media are in trouble, and highly pressed, despite this propaganda machine working all the days, we still have the audience which is looking for this investigation even in YouTube, and like thousands of people prefer this real information, sometimes more than million, in the investigations done earlier this year showed it, that's very important to understand that Russian audience still didn't tire of it, as propaganda usually wants to show, and to state. Russian audiences really needing this information. That's why we are doing it, And regarding the risks, I don't think that right now the risks are very huge, because now we have a kind of a bureaucracy pressure. We don't know what will happen next. Right now we have huge bureaucracy pressure, and the starting pressure from the point of view of from the part of the organizations, state institutions that can conduct criminal investigations. That's very important because, as you know, the founder of iStories Media became the figure of the criminal case. He's not accused. He doesn't have any accusation. He was just a witness there. But it was enough for the Russian law enforcement to raid his apartment and to interrogate him at night for several hours. That's a very important signal for us. And it showed that unfortunately in Russia it is unpredictable what will happen next. Right now I can say that well, I have no much risks. They usually press the founders. They usually press those who started the project, because in the understanding of Russian authorities, in their understanding of Russian officials, the founder is the person they should press by all means. They can't control this smaller media, because after they pressed the major media, they got plenty of news organizations, just the websites, just online media, and they don't know what to do with it, because the general audience, as the practice show, is growing. All these investigations in YouTube and just online got a huge amount of readers, a huge amount of those who watch it. They don't know how to deal with this problem, and the only thing they can do, in their understanding, is to start a kind of a criminal case, which can be used later by any moment, just to make the witness a person who will be accused. It's just a matter of several minutes, to put the signature over some document inside this machine. So of course, it is like very good reaction from the part of the authorities, which showed that we are doing really important work. And when they state that, we never paid attention, we will not start investigation, we will not start research, it's understandable in propaganda understanding, in propaganda means, but at the same time, understand that reality is different. In fact, they pay a lot of attention to what is going on. They consider it's a big danger for themselves. I don't know why. Really, as Sergey put it, they consider it to be a politics, though it has nothing to do with political things. It has just showed what they are doing regarding their finance, regarding their money, regarding conflicts of interests, and so on and so on. They have and difference between their public statements and what is going on in their real life. They consider it to be a politics, when you show what is going on. But unfortunately, we got used to it many years before, when just a usual business news became a matter of politics. You know that Vedomosti Business Daily in Russia, one of the prominent Russian business newspapers, which was started by the Wall Street Journal and Financial Times and Sanoma in Russia, it was finally absolutely ruined and now controlled by the people close to one of the Russian state-controlled companies, Rosneft. Yeah. So unfortunately, yeah, even the news in contemporary Russia is considered to be, even business news is considered to be something political. We are not looking at it from this angle. I don't consider that we are doing politics and we are political figures or we are involved in any political processes. We're just describing what's going on. Whether it is communists, yeah, who are considered to be oppositional people in Russia, yeah. We have several parliamentary members who are communists in the files. Whether they are members of United Russia pro-president political party who are also in the files, yeah, we are just writing about them and disclosing things they have, yeah, disclosing assets, wealth, values of offshore companies, offshore accounts, and so on and so on. The same about the closest Putin circle. I don't see any politics about it. If they are in the documents, it's not our fault that they got there. It's their own decision they made in their life several years ago. Yeah, so that's their problem.
Roman, thank you so much. Sveta, are you still with us? I know that you have to leave early. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, a question and then I'll rush. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So I want to ask you, because you are at Meduza now, and I think that Meduza is actually a really good example of what's happening with media organizations like this. Anybody who follows Meduza online, you look at Twitter, for example, right, or Facebook. Every tweet is basically the same kind of a message in block letters that they're obliged to say that the message that they are posting is being posted essentially by a foreign agent. I mean, and you see more and more of this. What I'm wondering about, have you, first of all, I want to ask, does this impact Meduza's ability to influence, I guess, and to reach audiences? I don't know if perhaps this is a question more to the management, but as a journalist, do you feel that this designation impacts?
Yeah.
Okay. And then one more question is, what has been the reaction? I know that Meduza has participated in, it didn't participate in the investigative project, but it helped to spread information to deliver it. So what has been the reaction to your publications regarding the Pandora project?
Well, I'll start from the second part of the question. I think the republication of Pandora Papers, or articles with using of the information from Pandora Papers, or any follow-ups with it, even like small follow-ups, they were read very good. So audience was pleased, which is very good. So audience is interested. So that's the answer to second part of the question. As for first part of the question, definitely I'm not a manager. I'm just a simple correspondent. I don't like even to be called special correspondent. Probably it's because of my age, you know, they're just calling me special correspondent. I'm just a reporter and a correspondent, also doing some investigation once in a while, not very often, not as good as Pandora Papers. But of course, it influenced my job. For example, this mark which we're using, I don't think it pushed away the audience, because for the audience, I think at some point they started to see it as a blind spot, if you know what I mean. I mean, it's something which they get used to. It's something which you see and it's annoying, but at the point it's like leakage at your apartment on the ceiling, you know, when you're not fixing it for a lot of time, you know it's there, but what the hell? I mean, let it be there. So whatever. And sorry, it's just my battery. So as for my job, it's very difficult because I'm mainly not working with the databases. I'm lousy in it, but I like to communicate with the people, and it's very difficult, let's say, because I have more anonymous sources than ever because a lot of people who were talking to me openly on the recording, right, they don't even let me to write in the, write on paper, because they're afraid, because they don't know what will happen to them, because they all, not like afraid, they're sort of terrified, and they have the right to do it because they don't know. Maybe this strange law, like remarkably strange and absurd law, will grow so strangely, and vividly. So next step will be the people who will communicate with the representative of the foreign agent journalist himself, they'll turn into foreign agent themselves. And we all have families, right? So, I mean, it's difficult to work because it's like, it's like you need to dance more, it's to talk someone into to meeting you, you need to push more energy. I'm doing it all right. At some point, I just started to receive some peculiar pleasure from it, because what doesn't kill you make you stronger, right? So I thought, if they're putting me in this situation like this, then I just need to invent more technique, more. So before, if some person will tell me, no, I don't want to meet with you, I say, okay, like, step up. Just think a couple of days. I'll go back to you with the new arguments. I'm really lousy so far, but I have a hope maybe I'll build my skills, because you don't have anything else in this situation. You can just pump up your skills, because they're just, doing your work more difficult than, you need to work somehow. But it's influenced a lot, really, massively. I mean, even let's say the people from the ministries who were just giving us commentaries before, right, like openly, official comments, right, they're not giving it because they don't know how to communicate with a foreign agent. And you're saying, bloody hell, why are you doing it? But sorry for cursing, but I mean, that's the situation. Okay, and after this, I really need to run because it's also my phone low on battery.
Yeah, Sveta, thank you so much.
And thank you for inviting.
Thank you for being with us.
Very, very welcome. And thank you. And sorry for the rush.
That's okay. That's okay. Sergey, I think I saw you react, kind of shake your head or nod as Sveta was talking. And I wonder if you have a reaction to what she was saying, even if she's not with us. Perhaps you can communicate it to our viewers.
That's, I think, about the reaction of Russian public of all these marks. I'm foreign agent, and this message is made by a foreign agent. It's exactly the situation of Nazi state and Jews. We have now a law in Russia who announces as a crime the comparison between decision of Soviet Union commandment and Nazi commandment on the Second World War. But we don't have for a moment a law who punish us with to compare the politics of modern Russia and the Nazi state. I remember very well all this story of German Jews who was obliged not only to obey some special Nazi law against the Jews, but all the time announce, all the time declare himself that it's a Jew. I'm Menachem Rabinovich, Jew. And even the special name was designated to German Jews to be used at this time. And I think this comparison is very correct now with Russia, because we have some people, some group of Russian citizens without any citizens' right, without any human right, and these people can be pressured in any possible way. These people can be blocked at home for many months. These people can be banned on social networks, on some professions. And the most important thing, without any participation of justice, of court. It's absolutely non-justice procedure. It's just by decision of some officer of a Russian one of Russian law enforcement agencies, and that's the most important thing. That these people don't have any possibility, any right to be any right to any referee, to any to any arbitrage. So that's the most important thing. And all the time, a Russian state made this comparison with foreign laws about the foreign agents. First of all, FARA law, American FARA law. But I never see such a disclaimer on the Russia Today publications in the United States. I never see any kind of these disclaimers, any obligations to name himself as a foreign agent. It's just on the level of some bureaucracy papers or some accountants, but never the public disclaimers on the publications, on the YouTube video of Russia Today or something like this. That's the discrimination, and that's the politics of Russian state now against the journalists. And I think it's a very visible and very demonstrative now. Thanks.
Thank you, Sergey. Ilya, I want to turn to you and ask you, I mean, I think the picture that we have from this is that really in Russia, it's really the most vulnerable journalists, it seems to me, the least protected journalists who are kind of carrying the heaviest load, the heaviest burden of these massive, really important investigations. And I'm wondering if in your network of those that participated in the Pandora Papers project, if there are, what is it like compared to other countries? Are there other countries where the situation is similar, where it's mostly independent individual people, journalists participating in this project? And then I'll ask you another question that I have.
I think that there are some countries that are worse. The one that I'm probably most familiar with is Azerbaijan, where we basically can't even reveal the names of the journalists who are working on these projects. And we don't really have media partners. You know, we are working with individuals and we can't even name them. I mean, and it's hard to think, you know, and I mostly also work in Central Asia, and there it is, probably, it depends heavily on the country. I think Kyrgyzstan is lucky to have a relatively free media environment, although there are various pressures and attacks. Some of them people in Russia would be familiar with, trolls and personal attacks and, you know, sort of whipping up nationalist sentiment against independent journalists as if they are enemies of the nation rather than informing the people of the nation about things that they really need to know about. Of course, you know, we just published today a story from Turkmenistan, and there it's just absolutely impossible to do work from inside the country. So we have to resort to working with, you know, brave journalists who unfortunately had to leave. So I hope it doesn't come to that in Russia, but, you know, a lot of people over the last year have had to leave, including colleagues of ours. So, you know, if you had to sort of create a spectrum, where would you place Russia? Probably it would be not the worst. And certainly there are many places that are easier. And I would say that the tendency is towards getting worse. You know, I think compared to a few years ago, certainly compared to 10 years ago, 5 years ago, it's quite a different quite a different environment.
And, I want to ask you a question that perhaps is technical, but it's hard not to be impressed as I was listening to your introductory remarks, given the world that we live in, that such a huge network was able to maintain its, the confidentiality of the investigation. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you to comment on the security of these communications, but is there anything you can say broadly? How do you in fact maintain the confidentiality of these investigations for such a long period of time? If there's anything you can say, I think it would be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are technical things that always help. Our previous large investigation this year, which was also a big international collaboration, was the Pegasus project, which was involving, an Israeli spyware company that was that one had really scary, security implications, and we had to take precautionary measures there that I've never had to take before, including, using separate equipment and moving physically to be with our colleagues, which, of course, this whole pandemic situation makes things even harder. But, I'm struck by the number of kind of personal relationships that are involved. Of course, in the OCCRP network, we've all known each other for years and we trust each other. And then within the larger ICIJ community, there's always various little squabbles and drama and stuff among journalists. But you couldn't do this really with people who you don't know, even if they have a great reputation in their home country, even if other people say they're great. I can't imagine organizing something that requires such security without having this kind of personal trust that's been built over the years. And so I would just say that's another reason that's another way in which journalists need support to build these networks, to have, physically just the ability to meet each other and go to conferences and then go out for beers after the conference, which is where the really interesting conversations take place, is when there's a little alcohol involved. But, this is like a lot of nonprofit newsrooms like ours. The kind of grant funding that you get is very sort of specified and tailored towards, produce X stories from Y region over Z amount of time. And it hurts us and makes it more difficult to work that we don't have as much core funding as we would like, that we could spend on things like holding a conference, just having journalists in the same room to brainstorm stories. It just, as an editor, coordinating the fact checking and the layout and finding the pictures, and oh my God, we have to publish this and I don't have a caption for this photo. If I can't run over to the next room and say, help, I need a caption, where did you get that photo? Even something as banal as that, it's so much harder to do over a distance. And as I said at the beginning, it is an international network. It'll always be an international network, but we'd have more breathing room to build and maintain and strengthen these relationships if we were freer, if the funding was more fungible. So I hope that, donors pay attention to this, and some of them do, and we do get some core funding, and we are building a membership program where our members, contribute monthly payments that we can use however we want. So I think it also goes to show that the resources are needed, not just for the physical production of the stories, but to build these networks of goodwill and collaboration that are necessary for these kind of investigations to take place.
Really crucial point. Thank you. Thank you for that. Sergey, I want to ask you to maybe comment on the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to Dmitry Muratov. I think that this is a pretty significant event. I think I also saw a post of yours on Facebook where you commented on some other people who might be candidates for this prize. And I wonder if you can maybe make those points here.
Yeah, it is a huge discussion now in Russia about this Nobel Prize, because lots of people expect that Alexei Navalny will be awarded by Nobel Prize, and for sure he's a good candidate. For sure he make a great effort, and it's just directly he's if it's a peace. If it's a peace Nobel Prize, we have a person who make peace in Russia, who is against war in Russia, because he's against Russian state, who make many wars now. And made many wars before. We remember war in Georgia, we remember war in Moldova, we remember the last war in southern Ukraine, and the participation of Russian forces in Syria and in some African state. The Russian state now, it's a war state. It's a state who produce a huge amount of armed conflicts on the world, and we have Alexei Navalny who fight against this. But it's a good decision. But it's a very noble decision, very serious, because that's the message of Nobel Committee about the importance of freedom of speech problem on the entire world and in Russia especially. I support this decision because it's now it's maybe more important thing. That's pandemia, where everybody can expect that this Nobel Prize will be given to international health organization or some medical people or some people who invented the anti-COVID vaccine. But Nobel Committee decided that the freedom of speech is even more important now in this world affected by pandemia, and I support this decision and this choice, even if I think Russia have at least two more great candidates to this Peace Prize. It's Alexei Navalny and Memorial, the most important and most influential Russian NGO, and that was the discussion in Russia, and I think it's a very interesting and serious now.
Thank you so much, Sergey. So I want to thank all of you, Ilya, Roman, Sergey, for joining us today, Svetlana in absentia. I want to thank everyone who's watching us today, and we look forward to having you with us at the next Kennan Institute event. Goodbye.